Hello everyone, and welcome to another video lesson from Victory English. And this time we will talk about health problems and making suggestions. So let's begin. In this lesson, we will look at some common and non-serious health problems. Non-serious, okay? Some common illnesses and sicknesses that people have, how to make a suggestion, and of course some tips to sound more natural and more like a native English speaker when you talk. Okay, so why do we need to learn this? Well, of course we all get sick sometimes, unfortunately, and it's important to be able to describe your problems. So perhaps you are traveling and you need to see the doctor, or maybe you just want to talk to your friends or your colleagues about your health issues. Okay, you can also use this to help other people by making suggestions, which is a great skill to have, very useful. And it also helps to build your skills and your confidence on other topics as well. So in this lesson, we will look at some common health problems and some suggestions that you can make about them, some advice, okay? So let's look very quickly at the grammar for the problems, okay, for the health problems. So we will use two structures and we have two options. The first option is I have, okay? And then we'll use the noun, which is the problem or the sickness. Number two, the other option is I'm having trouble, verb ing. I'm having trouble, verb ing. Okay, as always, we will look at some examples in the next slides, so don't worry. So here are our two options to talk about health problems. I have, I'm having trouble, verb ing, okay, for the health problems. How about the suggestions? To make a suggestion, again, we have two options and two structures. So we can say, why don't you? And then our suggestion, why don't you? Or we can say, I suggest, verb ing with this one, okay? So for the suggestion, two options again, why don't you? Or I suggest. Okay, so there is the grammar that we will use for the health problems and also for the suggestions. Okay, now some quick tips to sound more natural and sound more like a native English speaker, which is very important. So the first tip, when you talk about your health problem or your health issue, you can start with I have, and then follow up with I'm having trouble. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that we will use option one, and then we will also use option two as well. So we will use number one and number two. We'll put them together and use the two different structures at the same time. And this will sound really good, really natural and really native, okay? So that's the tip for your problems. And actually it's the same tip for the suggestions. So when making a suggestion, use the two structures, use why don't you? And then we can also use I suggest, verb ing. So we'll use the two of them together, okay? And of course, we'll look at some examples in the coming slides. So let's go to the next slide, the vocabulary slide, and look at some vocabulary that we can use to talk about health problems and make suggestions. Okay. Just move the video over here so we can see properly. Okay, now you may remember to talk about our health problems we use I have or I'm having trouble. So, of course, if you need to pause the video and check the meaning for any of these health problems, no problem. You can pause the video and you can check in your dictionary or your online translation to translate to your native language. Okay. So with I have, we need to use I have plus a noun. So we can say I have a sore throat. This is of course pain in here. When you have pain in this part here, a sore throat. A headache, when you have pain here in your head, headache. Just be careful with this word. We do not say headache. No, we say headache. Okay, headache. The next one is a cold. A cold. I have a cold. This is when you are kind of generally sick in your head. You have a runny nose, a headache, and many things. You are hot, lots of things together, a cold. Okay, an upset stomach. An upset stomach. Again, we do not say stomach, no. An upset stomach. Okay, so this is if you feel maybe sick in your stomach, like you will vomit, or your stomach is sore or something like that. Okay, the next one we have is a cough. Cough. Okay, this is of course when you a cough. Okay, and the last one, a fever. A fever. This is when you are very, very hot. You're very hot, and maybe you feel like you're very cold. Okay, so this is, remember, option 1. I have plus noun. So we can say I have a sore throat. I have a fever. I have a cough. Okay, and the next option was I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble. Remember, with this one, we need to use verb ing. Okay, I have plus noun. I'm having trouble, verb ing. I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm having trouble eating. Cannot eat properly. I'm having trouble walking. I'm having trouble talking. Okay, so these are some examples of the verb ing. I'm having trouble. So very quickly before we move on, these are the health problems, okay? So to talk about your health problem, you can use I have plus noun, or I'm having trouble, verb ing. But remember our tip, it's better to use the two options together. Okay, we start with I have, and then we follow up with I'm having trouble. So try your best to use both structures together, okay? Now let's have a look at the suggestion part, okay? So remember our options for making suggestions, why don't you? And the other option was I suggest, verb ing, okay? So why don't you see a doctor? See a doctor. Why don't you take some medicine? Take some medicine, okay? Of course, when you go to the pharmacy and take your medicine to feel better, get some rest. Get some rest, maybe go to sleep, take some time off work and rest and get better. Or we can maybe suggest, why don't you visit the pharmacy? The pharmacy is obviously where you will buy the drugs to get better. Okay, you can see here we have the verbs at the start of the suggestion. Okay, we have a verb here, see. We have a verb here, take, get, visit. Okay, why don't you? No verb ing. just the normal form of the verb. Okay, so let's go on to the next option, which is I suggest, verb ing. Okay, I suggest taking a day off. You can see we have verb ing here. Taking a day off, maybe not going to work or not going to school. I suggest drinking some hot tea. Maybe this can help with your sore throat or if you have a cough or something. Okay, so there are all of our options we have over here for the health problems. I have plus noun. I'm having trouble, verb ing. Why don't you, and your suggestion. And I suggest, verb ing. Okay, again, if you need to pause the video and check the meaning, please go ahead. And now we will move on to look at the examples of some sentences. Okay, let's go to the next slide here, the sentence slide. Let's look at some examples of these sentences talking about health problems and making suggestions. So first thing, we need to introduce the problem. Okay, for example, if I say, how are you? You can say, I'm not feeling so good. I'm not well. Or a very good thing to say is, I'm a little under the weather. Under the weather. Okay, this is a very common expression to say you feel sick or you have a health problem. Under the weather. Okay, just a handy expression. So to talk about your health problem, remember we have a couple of options. We can use I have plus noun. So I have a sore throat. I have a cough and a fever. This is good because we can add two nouns together. I have a sore throat and a cough. I have a fever and a cold. Okay, we can add them together to make the sentences longer. And here is an example of when we use the two structures together. So this is the best way to use this, okay? The best way to talk about your health problem like a native English speaker. I have a cold and I'm having trouble eating. You can see we have the two structures in the same sentence. I have plus I'm having, verb ing. Okay. So again, another example. I have a headache, pain here, and I'm having trouble sleeping. So again, we have the two structures. I have, also I'm having trouble, verb ing. Okay. So you can see this gentleman here, he has a cough. Okay, I have a cough. So what about when you want to make a suggestion? Remember, we have two structures for this one also. Why don't you see a doctor? So remember, we have the first option was why don't you plus the suggestion. Why don't you see a doctor? Or why don't you visit the pharmacy? Okay, visit the pharmacy and talk to the staff and see if they have some medicine for you. Again, why don't you get some rest? And the next one we had was I suggest, verb ing. I suggest, verb ing. Okay, in this example, you can see we are using I suggest, verb ing, and then we're adding another suggestion, verb ing. So this is a great example of sounding really natural and really fluent because we're adding more together. Instead of just saying very short sentences, we're making it longer with more information, more suggestions, okay? So I suggest taking a day off and getting some rest. Or here we have a very good example of the two structures together. I suggest drinking some tea, and why don't you take some medicine? Here we have the two structures. I suggest and why don't you? Okay, so there are plenty of examples here. So remember here, just to highlight and remind you, this is the most important thing here, is to try to add them together. Up here you can see what I'm talking about. Try to add as many things together with the different structures and different suggestions and problems. Add them together and it will sound really good. Sounds a lot better. Okay, excellent. So let's go on to the next slide here, the summary slide, very quickly, and have a look at what did we learn today. Okay, so unfortunately, we all get sick sometimes, and talking about your problem or your health issue is not only is it a useful skill, but it's sometimes a necessary skill. It's quite important in life, okay? So making and understanding suggestions is essential, not only for health, you can also make suggestions about anything. So in this video, we talked about suggestions for people who are feeling under the weather, but you can make a suggestion about anything you like using the same structure. The same structure, why don't you, or I suggest, verb ing. Okay, so remember our tips to sound more fluent. Try to add the different structures together to form longer sentences. Longer sentences. So we use I have or I'm having trouble to talk about your problems, such as a sore throat, headache, fever. Okay, and then we will use why don't you or I suggest, verb ing, to make a suggestion. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video lesson and learned something new. If you did find this video helpful, please press the like button and leave a comment down below to let us know. So thank you very much for watching and see you again next time. Bye-bye.